Hello, hello. This is We Cold Beans. I am one of your hosts, Fowler, and there's also my other host, Ardot,
This
and
that
we are
was
here.
this is the most milquetoast opening I've. You sound like you're about to read off like the Encyclopedia Britannica.
Okay, you want me to have a little bit more pep to my step?
I mean, we're not restarting the podcast, so I'm just telling you. You can continue.
Okay, you deliver about this energy most of the
No,
time,
I
and
deliver significantly more energy than you. I'm just keep continue.
okay, and we're going to be talking about three things. We're going to be talking about the Justice Democrats who just laid off half their staff. We're going to be talking about viral videos, and we're going to talk about updates to the Alien story.
Not
So,
in that order.
sure, not in that order. So, for those of you who don't know, the Justice Democrats are uh, they're like a super PAC, I think, and basically what they do is they give funding sometimes, but mainly media training and strategy training to um, progressives who are trying to run against and beat incumbent moderate or corporate Democrats. And they famously have elected, I think, 12 people to Congress.
Yeah,
And you
familiar
know who
names.
they are. AOC was a Justice Democrat, Jamal Bowman, Cory Bush, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, so Ayanna Presley. So they've had a couple of like pretty big figures. But the thing is, the Justice Democrats are laying off about half of their staff because they've been having a lot of problems financially. They're basically completely funded by roots donations, and they have just lost a significant amount of money in spite, electing 12 congressmen, which is, as you can imagine, like a pretty big deal.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation. The Justice Democrats are, most definitely one of the only progressive forces that are active in the mainstream Democratic Party now. I can't think of a more famous congressperson than, AOC. Uh, and second to AOC is of course Ilhan Omar. So it's pretty astounding that they're losing funding from grassroots because of this. Now, Fowler, we talked about this. What I can't remember. What did you say you think the reason for that is?
I think a lot of the problem is people are very cynical and very upset right now with the progressive movement. I think a lot of people, because the Justice Democrats lost a lot of money and they had to basically fire a bunch of their staff, but like they're not the only ones. If you look at like polling and you look at the data, pretty much every progressive movement is now pulling in less donations than they were like a year and a half ago. But I think a lot of it is, I think people are frustrated at what they perceive as a lack of action. Like I think really the last time the progressives were in the spotlight for a good reason and had any sort of hope was Bernie Sanders' 2020 presidential campaign. And I think like the progressive caucus has not really been very effective force in Congress. They have not achieved any of the goals that they were trying to lay out: $15 minimum wage, Medicare for all, free college. And I think a lot of people, and in particular a lot of the grass roots donations people, I think they have become more and more disillusioned by them, and it's impossible to keep the momentum going if the movement essentially, you know, feels like you've abandoned them.
Yeah, it's yeah, I definitely think lack of success is one of the reasons why people are, or people have become, I guess, disengaged with the progressive movement. I also, I don't think the media has helped the progressive movement in any way, shape, or form. They are not favorable to progressives. Um, they cover them because, especially Ilhan Omar, she is a media magnet for the most part. I do think the media is somewhat biased towards the progressive movement. Um, I also think there's been some tactical bumbles on the fault of the Justice Democrats. Um,
You're talking about the Justice Democrats as in the congressman, or the Justice Democrats as
well,
in the organization?
the congressman. I'm sorry,
Oh, okay.
I should have been more clear about that. I think there's
We
been
might want to just call them the Progressive Caucus, because that'll be a little bit
be easier to
clearer.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's been some tactical bumbles by the Progressive Caucus that have hurt them in a way. I I'm not trying to single out Ilhan Omar, but I think she has made comments that have put her in a precarious position amongst the progressives and the moderates. Although the extent of that, the extent to whether or not that is really her fault, I think is debatable. Um, I think as a black Muslim, uh, woman who's representing one of the only majority Muslim counties in America. I don't know. I don't know how well she could have done. I don't know if she could have talked the talk her way
I mean,
into.
it's definitely a more difficult path to be a progressive who tries to pass meaningful policy in America. But at the exact same time, like, the movement needs victories. The movement needs people to win, and like, we really only have one all-star A-list player in the progressive movement, and that's Bernie Sanders. So I think, I don't know, they're in a difficult position certainly, but I think they've made it harder for themselves.
Yeah,
And I think there's a lot of different things. I don't think that they've worked very effectively to cultivate the movement by keeping in contact with progressive media like the Young Turks or the Secular Talk, who have become increasingly disillusioned by them. I think there was some evidence in the HuffPost article I read about this, that like the Progressive Caucus has not been like really working together as a team for like long-term strategy or like coordinating with each other,
which
which
is
is
insane,
disastrous.
which is
Yeah.
unbelievable to me. Um, that to me, you told me that yesterday, Fowler, and that to me is like astounding. Um, I mean, I don't know what it is about progressives or maybe the broader left that just seems like allergic to collaboration. I see this a lot on the online left, and then it seems to be prevalent in the progressive caucus as well. Like if we're just talking about media, I'm astounded at, like the Daily Wire is a great example of a and PragerU as well. But mostly the Daily Wire, and even PragerU and the Daily Wire, they collaborate. I don't know if PragerU is an extension of the Daily Wire, but um, the Daily Wire and PragerU definitely have overlap. Uh, and they've built this sprawling, sort of, I don't want to say grassroots, but it is new media empire that has dozens of channels attached, and you wouldn't know, if that those channels were attached, until you check their, Twitter, or I'm sorry, X. uh,
But
you know,
they're also funded by big donors.
yes,
Like
true,
the
true, 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 true.
problem with the Sierra movement, Sunrise movement, just Democrats, like they only take grass dollar donations because they're philosophically Bernie-crats. They don't want like the big money. So like I know for a fact of the Daily Wire that like I think like most of the Daily Wire funding, and that's tens of millions of dollars, came from a single oil magnate from Texas.
True.
And
Yeah, yeah.
the Justice Democrats can't do that. They can't call up like a working mom of three and be like, "Hey, can you give me $30 million to run my campaign
True, true,
or
true,
run
true.
the campaigns?"
No, you're absolutely correct. And that, I guess that was to my point that the Justice Democrats, as well as just leftist media, is not funded by big money, and that makes it significantly more difficult to have the level of outreach that, like, you know, um, the Daily Wire or PragerU has, and that's not, that's just media if we're talking about, uh, you know, something like the Daily Wire. But I don't know what the solution is. Like, I don't know how you get out of a hole like that. If you are funding exclusively through grassroots, the people really are the um the people really are the power. And as we've talked about in the past on the podcast, Fowler, one of the driving forces or one of the ways in which you get the support of the people is through a broad populist movement. And I feel like with the Progressive Caucus, you know like, I think Bernie Sanders was kind of the only example that we had, and he's lost. He lost both elections, and I don't think he is. I think he understands that his time is starting to pass. That the progressives have to move on from him, because he's lost two elections, and he's not young. He's not he is not the generation that's going to be stepping up to the plate, in the next decade. And I feel like the Progressive Caucus just doesn't have that figure yet. I like, AOC, for all her faults, for all her what's good. She is not. I see her as a decent congressman, but I can't see her in a position of, level authority. The type of authority that Bernie Sanders was able to command, which was in part, because of his clout, because of the fact that he'd been in Congress for 40 years. You know. Um.
Yeah, we need more. I agree with you. We need more figureheads. We also need more institutions like to be preserved. Like it's absolutely insane, given the fact that AOC and Rashida Tlaib and Cory Bush raised tens of millions of dollars. It's insane that they allowed the Justice Democrats to deteriorate to such a point they had to fire half their staff. Given that like the Justice Democrats are pretty much the only progressive organization that elects congressmen. So getting like the Justice Democrats falling apart is the death of like us being able to get more political allies. So even from like a strategic standpoint. But I mean the because of the fact that the progressives rely on grass dollar donations, like they just don't have the institutional infrastructure to support their candidates that the right wing does.
Yeah, and that's you know
This
that's
wasn't a part of the article, but I think it's also another interesting point. I think the other thing is because time has passed, the corporate Democrats have become more and more effective at fighting um, progressive challengers. Like
yeah,
famously, when AOC was running against Joe Crowley didn't campaign in his district during that race because he thought that she was a nobody. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And now, like I think her name was Summer Lee. Corporate Democrats gave her like opponent $4 million to beat her. So like I think the slowdown is also that it's that
yeah,
like and I think we see this with Trump too. Like now that Trump's being indicted and like people are openly calling him fascistic, like they've sort of been inoculated to his tactics. Whereas like in 2016, nobody was prepared, and I think to some degree we squandered that initial momentum. Like I think we were in a way better position in 2018, and
I
if we
agree.
had been more
Yeah,
aggressive. But now, like they're kind of a part of the game, and our political opponents know how to deal with them to some degree.
yeah, yeah, and I think the media polarization, has also not benefited the Progressive Caucus either. Like, AOC has a brand of politics now that is known to people, and it is off-putting. Regardless of whether or not what is said about AOC is true, because as we've talked about on the podcast before, the way the media works now in comparison to 50 years ago, um, they show a fraction of what the person says. So you could say, I love waffles with sugar on top and strawberry syrup, and the media will only play the part where you say I love waffles, and then you have you know people get mad because you didn't say that you like strawberry syrup, but they didn't play the whole clip, and you talk about that later on, but um, clippable media that can be easily circulated around Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. And just to let y'all know, I'm still going to call Twitter Twitter. I'm not calling it X. No. It's Twitter. But circulating around Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, I think also doesn't help, progressives, or at least it's not been used to help progressives, because there's a specific brand of politics that is now associated with AOC, with, Ayanna Pressley, with Rashida Tlaib, and with Ilhan Omar, although I think AOC, she is kind of a figurehead now, more than any of the other ones that I mentioned. And there is an AOC brand that exists, that is used by the right and by moderates.
Her brand might be screwed ultimately because she's tied to such an ineffectual movement.
Yes.
Like I think like in 20 years if AOC runs for president or something like that, like a progressive challenger could point out like you didn't pass the Green New Deal, you didn't pass $50 minimum wage, you didn't pass Medicare, like you've been in Congress for like decades, like what have you done that's
Yeah.
worthwhile to people?
Yeah. No, it's definitely a lot. Grabbing national power is definitely, I think the progressives have been decent with speaking to the needs of their individual constituency. I know for a fact that AOC is very well liked amongst her constituents. Same with Cori Bush, same with Ayanna Pressley, same with Ilhan Omar. All of them have decent approval ratings amongst the people they represent, but that's not enough to grab national power, especially when there's only 12.
Yeah, it's just a much more difficult game relying on grass dollar donations because the
It's like you
people
can't do it in the long term. You know what I mean? It's a good starter, but you can't, like, over time, relying on grassroots. It's just not enough.
I don't know if I agree with that though because like
If you
it's
want to go
not
to
a
the big leagues.
coincidence. It's not a coincidence that most of the Justice Democrats are socialists, like crypto socialists, or at the very least, like social democrats. Like, like billionaires and billionaires do not want a person who doesn't believe billionaires should exist to be in Congress. They do not want people in Congress who want to nationalize their industries. So, like, I think the grass dollar donations is necessary for progressives
Yeah,
because
I
we are
definitely agree with
economically
you.
radical.
I think it's necessary, but I don't. Has there ever been a president or even like a governor who's won? I mean, maybe Bernie Sanders is probably the closest we've come, but is there any historical examples? And I'm asking in genuine good faith. I don't really know, so I could be proven completely wrong. Is there any like national historical examples of like presidents winning pretty much exclusively on uh, grassroots donations, or even is grassroots donations, the concept of like grassroots donations, that are relatively contemporary,
That's very contemporary.
very
The first
contemporary.
person to use online grassroots donations was Howard Dean, and he was from the 90s. So like we're talking about like a business model that has only existed for like our lifetimes basically.
Wow. Okay. So maybe I am. Maybe I think I might have. I think I thought there was a historical precedent, but I might be wrong about
There have been movements that have been grass dollar donation, like the Populist Party in the 1850s and 60s was basically all poor farmers. And you had some parts of prohibition were pretty grassroots pushed, but I don't think there's ever been like a historical figure whose money was completely clean. The closest to that is there have been presidents like FDR famously was the union president, and he had like an enormous political machine of union members who fundraised for him and knocked on doors.
that. Wow. Which makes sense. And maybe looking at unions is a way forward. Looking at the
Unions are complicated though because they're progressive in some ways and not progressive in others because unions are about protecting their workers, not protecting all the workers. So they tend to be against universal programs a lot of times. Like it was a big deal during the 2020 race that like the culinary union in Nevada, I think, was against Bernie Sanders because Like they didn't care about Medicare, they cared about their own contracts. And then union guys are also, they tend to be pretty bad on environmental issues.
Mm.
They're a very weird um group within the progressive coalition usually.
Hmm. And we know how the police unions fall. I was about to make a joke about that. You're like, I know which ones we can not count on, and it starts with a C and ends with a P. um,
Yeah, I don't know. There needs to be more big picture strategy. I feel like that's the problem. No, no. What was her name? Nomi Konst, who is like kind of an interesting figure. She used to be. She ran for office, and I think she's a media figure now. But she was making the point that like the movement's in a really bad position right now. We have progressive media. We have progressive politicians. We don't really have like big picture players who are like orchestrating the people in ways that I think are necessary for this. Like
yeah,
LBJ and FDR, who are probably the greatest progressives of the 20th century, like neither of them would have done shit if it wasn't for the fact that unions and civil rights workers and all these different groups of people were breathing down their necks. And
yeah,
the progressive caucus is not going to pass meaningful legislation if they're not held accountable and there isn't powerful outsider figures in the media and in the movement that are basically like, you're only going to get reelected if you show results.
yes, I agree with you completely on that. It's a very grim situation, and I don't know if politics just needs shakeups. I don't know if it's that this model is not working. I don't know if it's an issue with the model, but or if it's an issue with the people within the the model. Um, it's going to become harder and harder as socioeconomic conditions become more exacerbated by the degradation of our institutions. Perhaps 2024 is going to be the catalyst, the decider. I think 2024 is going to decide the next 20 years of American politics. Uh,
But that's
whoever
not when the progressives are going to shine. Like
exactly.
the 2024 race will be the moderate Democrats versus the fascists
Yeah.
in the Republican Party. There's no place in that race for like a Bernie Sanders type.
So
And
I
I think
guess
that's one of the reasons he did so poorly in 2020 is like the argument Joe Biden made that I think won him the presidency is he basically pointed to Bernie and said, or he pointed to Trump and said, like, I am the electable one out of the two of us. Out of between me and Bernie, I am the electable one. And the Democratic Party did not vote for Joe Biden because they like Joe Biden. They voted for him because they were terrified of what the Republican Party has become.
yeah,
And I can't imagine that strategy will not be used in 2024. And I can't imagine it won't be more effective or even more effective given the crazy things Donald Trump has said,
since
since
2020.
leaving office.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
I
yeah,
think anyone who argues that like anyone who argues the lesser of two evils argument at this point is like a moron or a maniac. The Democratic Party has shown pretty conclusively that they are terrified of Trump and that is their primary thing that they want to eliminate. And everything else is
secondary.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe this time can be used to organize and strategize. Um, by the progressives, but it doesn't seem, that's what I was hoping would be done, but that doesn't seem to be what's happening. And that's also my worry. Like I
Hmm.
thought that the Biden presidency was going to be a great time for progressives to really, really, use Biden as an example, but I think Trump's continued presence is never going to guarantee that. And I think the general presence and attitude of the Republican Party is never going to really allow for that either. I think it goes beyond Trump in a way. I think the existence of DeSantis, the existence of pretty much the entire current Republican roster, that Vivek Ramaswamy dude, whose entire fucking political playbook is just like, let's be as online, like his political strategy is to be like to like rap Eminem and then to go and say like, what if we just abolished the FBI and we just like got rid of like the IRS? And then when you ask him like, what are you gonna do about taxes? He's like, I don't know, like just complete brain dead politics, and let's not even talk about the Democrat side with RF, you know, uh, jet fuel can't melt steel beams, RFK, and and fucking Marion, I shove crystals up my asshole, Williamson. So, I think all in all, like, joke politics are currently happening, and so I think, like, there's not really an avenue for progressives to move because they're surrounded by, like, the worst of the worst. Does that make any sense?
Sense. I mean, a lot of our conversations have been about how to build power for the left, and I think that's a really difficult question and one that historically people are not great at. I mean, the two arguments about civil, like in the 60s, was civil rights, which was the most successful mass movement in that era. The debate was whether or not like voting was worthwhile, whether or not allying with the Democrats was worthwhile, and whether or not violence was the answer to solving white supremacy. And the populist movement was kind of the same thing. Like, the reality is that when most of your constituency, or the most of the movement, is made up of like not particularly well educated lower class people, like, they're just not as well organized because of prejudices and sort of their own problems, and they just don't have the necessary education oftentimes. Like, they have to debate the simplest things in order to achieve their goals. And I think that's a lot of what I attribute to like the burn your bus movement in 2020, and some of the like crazier third party people, is that like
Or even just
the
general
people
left
are
wing.
angry and scared, but they're not they don't really know what's happening, or how to fix the problem.
Well, even just to me, it's just I see it in general, like left wing discourse. Like, should white people wear braids? Like that will dominate. Fucking, you know, or like, should white people be like eat spicy food? Like, it's just it's all very petty shit that has no meaning broadly, and um, but I would love to talk more about this honestly, but we're at 27 minutes and we do have to move on to other topics.
Sure,
So
let's
so I'm I'm
we can
I'm
move on.
I'm cutting the rope, but not because I want to. I would love to talk more about this topic, but we do have limited time because my computer has a detonator at the bottom that's ticking, and it will blow up if I have to process more than 50 minutes of a podcast audio.
That's why you should buy a Mac, R dot.
No, no, no. Since you just said that, I'm not going to do it.
There are two types of progressives in the progressive movement. There are those who use Macs, and there are the degenerates. That's the way I break down our movement.
Yeah, yeah. No, Windows owns this pussy. Okay, don't don't do Windows. Don't do Billy. Don't do Billy like that. Okay. Don't do Mr. Gates like that. He's currently saving the entire continent of Africa, one charity at a time. Anywho,
You might be the one progressive who's pro Bill Gates.
yeah, I know.
That's a hot
He
take
provides
there.
me with fantastic audio equipment and computers. I like him, Uh, can't say nothing about him. Anyway, we got to move on. So this is an interlude. I wanted to provide an update to the alien situation because I feel like we got ourselves into the mess, so we have to see it through. Um, yeah. So an update to the alien story that we talked about last podcast. The David Grush, the 36-year-old retired Air Force intelligence officer, um, basically there was a
Ken Klippenstein reported
yes,
that he has done time in a mental ward and he's an alcoholic.
yes. Now, and not only that, but he was allowed to keep his security clearance. Now I don't fucking know. Like, hey, I guess it does cast doubts on on his his story. I don't really know what to do with the entire thing with the UFO is basically I read the shit and I'm like, damn, that's crazy. I don't know what to do with this information. Like, that's how I've handled like there's no like objective analysis. Like, I don't really that I could make. It's like, all right, so he was in a mental asylum, and he also was a reported alcoholic who had suicidal ideations. So that's a thing. Um I know the reason why this was published. It was to cast doubts on his accounts, which it most likely will. Um, but it is good to have more information on his background. Uh, so we will see. We will see if more information comes out about his accounts. I'm not really interested in him. I'm interested in people who can corroborate what he said. I
I
don't
agree.
really care. You know what I mean? Like, I don't really give a shit if he was an alcoholic. Like, there are
It's
alcoholics
not a
who are
good
also
sign though
correct.
that he's the. It's not a good sign though that he's like the star witness. Like the whatever the committee that like put his testimony together probably should have known. Like they really handed their opposition like the baseball bat in
Yeah,
this.
yeah, definitely. It's. I'm more interested in corroboration and with other accounts. Like that's primarily for me what I want to hear. I want to hear if there are people who are going to come out and say that he's lying, or if there's people that are going to come out and disprove what he's saying. That's what I care about. I don't really give a shit if the man like like hits himself in the face with a paddle. Like I don't really give a shit. Um, but yeah, so that's a quick update to that. Just some more news. So we don't look dumb like we do the Russian shit. Um, uh, the next topic I want to talk about, and we will talk briefly about this because we are kind of running out of time, but I feel like a fruitful conversation is meant to be had about the lovely Montgomery brawl that happened a couple days ago. Now, just to give you all some backstory, And you can. I feel like if you've not seen the clip at this point, you've had your head under a rock, and you can go look up Montgomery Brawl on YouTube and watch the actual clip. But I'm going to give you a quick audio description of what happened. So, picture this: man, employee on a dock, riverboat coming to dock, black guy, like 6'2". I don't know. It was from far away. White hat, white shirt. He's telling these people in a boat that are parked where the riverboat is supposed to be that they need to move their boat. Uh, you know, for the sake of the way this is being narrativized, I have to specify the ethnicity of those involved. I don't like doing this because I really don't think it matters. But the owners of the very, very nice boat were white. White. Of the Caucasian type, of European descent, one might say.
Some goddamn honkies, as some might say.
One might even make a whipping sound to describe them. But they're on their boat, right? And the black guy, the employee, is telling them to like move their fucking boat so the big tourist riverboat can dock. Huge ass riverboat. These, they take people on tours up and down the uh, Mississippi River. Is that the river? I don't know. Whatever river is in Montgomery. I think it's the Mississippi. I'm bad with geology. Um, and the dudes are not moving their fucking boat. So employee, understandably, is getting very upset. And there's an exchange that apparently went on for a good 5 minutes before things got physical. So the employee, he's fed up. Understandably, he unties their boat and is like, "I'm just gonna untie you from the dock and watch you fucking float away and wave." They get pissed. They get off the boat. They attack them. There's like 4 dudes. Employee starts whooping ass. He throws his hat up. I don't know if that was like a call to arms.
He throws it absurdly
Yeah,
high.
sure,
Too.
like
It isn't like
insanely
a
high.
casual toss. He like throws it like
He
50 feet
chucks it
above
like
his head.
he's like summoning like a Pokemon. Like, like it's. I thought a fucking Charizard was gonna come down and just like land and start fucking blowing fire. But and then all of a sudden it's like the end scene in Avengers Endgame where all the fucking people come out of the portals. Like it was a brawl. Somebody so this is the funniest part. If you watch the video, somebody jumped off the docking riverboat and swims to come and help this man fight. And I think all in all, a chair was thrown, because this is a Boondocks episode. Somebody threw a chair. Uh, it was great. And so far, I think like 7 people have been arrested. My favorite thing, Montgomery police chief went on live TV and was like, "If you threw a chair, please turn yourself into the cops." And I don't know if he did or not. I hope he didn't. Uh,
You want him to be the one survivor of
I do. I want Chair Guy to be the one guy that got away.
massacre?
Yeah, absolutely. No, nobody died. It's not a massacre. Uh, but
R.I.P. to the hat, though.
yeah,
That
R.I.P.
hat
to the hat.
definitely
That
died.
hat went into the water. It was a nice looking hat too, but Anyway, this clip goes viral. Now, my assessment of all of this, before I get into the actual, like, sociological analysis of how this video went viral, my opinion on the whole thing, one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my whole life. I don't care if they're white, black, whatever. I don't even care. I don't know the intent of the white men who attacked the black. I don't know if they had racist intent. I don't know if any slurs were. I don't care. The whole thing, really funny. Uh, just very funny. It's very funny. I laughed, you know, and then I went about my day. But other people had other ideas. Other people did not do what I did and just laugh really hard and then continue living their life unencumbered by the fact that, like, somebody threw a chair in a fight in Montgomery. No, people took to Twitter. And this is something that I think speaks to an overarching theme, right? You know, increasingly, as political polarization has become more and more prevalent, what's also become more and more prevalent is the usage of videos, viral videos, to sow outrage and to spread specific narratives, mostly racial narratives. I think I think more than anything else that um, when people post videos of one particular ethnicity doing something, whether it be a white person yelling at a black person yelling at a white person, an immigrant yelling at somebody who's not an immigrant, and vice versa. There was a strategic use um, for these videos, and these videos go viral for a reason, because they feed into the resentment and anger that is being cooked up by political polarization. You know,
I think you could make a very good argument that BLM wouldn't have happened without the use of cell phone footage going viral in the case of many of the people who were killed.
true. I absolutely
The
agree with you.
only I don't remember. I feel like the only one I could think of that went really high profile that wasn't recorded is I don't think there was recording of the nurse who was shot in the hallway. But I mean everyone else, George
What? Hang
Floyd,
on.
Eric Garner.
Which nurse? Oh, Breonna Taylor.
Yeah, I
Yes.
don't remember. I don't think she was recorded, but everyone else, Eric Garner, Tamir Rice, George Floyd, all of them were like cell phone footage of them dying, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And they're you know, we're living through a very interesting time in history. I think because I think now more than ever, and I think we saw this obviously with the Vietnam War. There's I remember reading about the television is that how you say that word?
I think so.
Television of, like, the Vietnam War. It was one of the first times in American history that you could sit on. It was the beginning of the 24-hour news cycle. Um, so you could sit at home for 24 hours and watch coverage of Vietnam, um, and watch and watch you know stories of people in Vietnam, soldiers and civilians. I think, and you know more about this than me. Vietnam, Fowler, was also around the time that, like, left-wing anti-war activism and media apparatus started to really pop off. Am I right about that or wrong?
Yeah, the
Like,
Vietnam War was the first televised war, basically, and because of that, like it's really the first like huge non-violence pacifist stuff. I mean, there were people like Eugene Debs and other like labor leaders in the early 20th century who also were anti-war, but like that was the first time they were truly mainstream, and their message was actually legitimately capable of,
reaching
um,
people.
yeah,
Yeah, and I think, it was the idea was, you have this 24-hour news cycle, you have this new technology that allows you to essentially broadcast information to people easily, more easily than was ever able to be broadcast during, like, World War II, and anti-war pacifists, civil rights leaders, they took advantage of that and they made good use of that technology. And I feel like in a weird way, a lot of, the new age technology, the clips, the no context video of the black guy yelling at the white woman, and then because of the unique political situation we're living in, the automatic assumption and is that it was the white woman who antagonized this black guy, and then you find out later that that's not what happened. Um, but the person who posted the video, that's the narrative that they push because they only posted a minute and a half of the video, and there's a full 5 minutes that nobody else knows about. Um, it's manipulating media to push selective outrage to further whatever agenda you want to further. And I think, you know, beforehand during the Vietnam War and during the anti-war protest, that footage would be in the hands of specific organizations with, very specific goals, specific journalists. Now everybody has the phone in their hand. Everybody has the ability to post whatever they want, to the internet and have it
For
be
better or
taken.
for worse,
Yeah, for
because I
better or
think
for
you can
worse.
also point out like the positive elements of it, like anti-Iraq war sentiment or
Exactly.
BLM. There's also a lot of
I think the
darker
Ukrainian.
stuff.
I think the war in Ukraine is one of the best examples of this because I don't think I think a lot of people's opposition to the war in Ukraine was probably helped by the fact that Ukraine was a relatively modern Western society where everybody pretty much had cell phones and had access to the internet in ways that other countries might not have, and they were able to post what it's really like. Um, in Kiev, in these hotspots of Russian aggression, and had it not been for that, had it not been for them being able to expose the true horror of war, from a TikTok, that they were able to post. Um, I mean the anti-war sentiments. I think that that's helped their case and has helped the anti-war sentiments, that have continued since the invasion.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree.
so that to me is like the probably the best contemporary example of that. And you know, it just all of it just reiterates, to me as I look at the racial narratives that are being formed. There are entire accounts on the internet that are dedicated to finding videos of black people doing crazy shit and posting them, and there are entire accounts on Twitter, more so the former than what I'm about to mention, but there are entire accounts, dedicated to black people finding videos of white people doing shit. Tariq Nasheed, basically, that's Tariq Nasheed's his entire thing is just spreading anti-white hatred and posting videos of white people doing relatively innocuous and like innocent things, and then he like edits the footage or like frames it in a way to try to make the white person seem like a demon, and to
Mm.
sow racial hatred. That's his whole like literally that is uh, his entire purpose on on the internet pretty much. And there are tons of accounts like his. Um, they're all working towards the same purpose, which is destabilization, which is you know um, polarization and hatred of your neighbor. Um, it's just being done by smaller actors now,
Mm, agreed.
pushing a political goal, right? A political agenda. And it's always been the case. That's always been the case with any media, but it's now being done, you know, it can now be done from the comfort of your own home. Uh, you don't have to be special to partake in that. And it's just something I want everybody to think about. When you go on the internet and you watch these videos and you see, it's this is
The
not
board
new.
that I think his name is, I've only read it, I haven't heard it. He was a French media scientist and philosopher, but he had this interesting idea of, he talked about like the way the news works is it's um, because the news is so complicated, what you're really doing if you have intermediaries who are like giving you the news for you is um, they essentially create spectacle. They take spectacles and
Yeah.
they choose selectively what spectacles they pick as a way of essentially like breaking the news down and making it decipherable to the average person. And like all of media is that it's the creation of spectacle in order to tell a story.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
it's just the this is just like the logical conclusion of that, of
Of that
like
model.
now everyone can create spectacle, not just like the media institutions that used to be able to do it or the politicians.
Absolutely. Um, and like you said, it's for better or for worse. Because I don't know. There are so many things. I would say since the emergence of mass media and social media in particular, so many things that have happened, so many political decisions that have been influenced, I think, by the existence of a viral video. Obviously
Mm.
Black Lives Matter being the most infamous one. Black Lives Matter would not exist without social media. Um,
Yeah,
and
and going back to the Justice Democrats, like how do you raise grass dollar donations? Part of it is creating spectacle and being good at symbolically demonstrating the progressive cause and symbolically demonstrating the the positive elements of what you're doing.
absolutely. And you have to be able to balance that with good politics. And I think that sometimes juggling that is really difficult. You have to find the right type of person who understands good politics, but also understands spectacle.
Yeah,
And maybe
agreed.
that's just what the Justice Democrats need. Uh, they need someone who can be that figure. Uh, so I'm going to go ahead and we're going to wrap this up now because we are at 45 minutes, 46 minutes, and again I have a 50-minute timer set on my computer that will blow up if I try to render anything past 50 minutes of footage. Uh, and no, getting a Mac will not make that better, Fowler. Fuck you.
Macs are the superior race.
All right, fucking. Uh, I don't even have a. I tried to make an Apple pun. I was gonna call you like Steve Fuhrer or some shit like that. God, my brain is tired this weekend, y'all.
Just
Just
because of that, just because of that comment, we're gonna get negative 300 views on this video. You don't know
nah.
how many members of the audience are actually Mac users, you know?
Well, I know because I have an Android, and everybody lets me know every day how better Apple is. This is why I don't get a Mac because of y'all. Because y'all are like discriminatory. I don't understand it. You're like French people, like so rude for no reason. Like you're the like Apple users are like the French of like fucking technology. You just love telling everybody how great it is that you have a MacBook or an iPhone. And then when anybody's like, "Yeah, I kind of like mine," you're like, "No, kill yourself!" Like you're just horrible. I like my Android and my Windows computer, so you know I'm proud and independent. You can't tell me what to do. Anyway, we're at 48 minutes, so we gotta go. Fowler, sign us out, please.
If you enjoyed this video, you must continue to watch our other videos. That's the deal.
You're gonna waste 2 minutes on this outro so that it hits 50 minutes. Don't try that. I'm the one
No,
who's
you do
recording,
it.
so I
You
can
do
just
it.
hit stop anytime I want, and you will stop. You won't. It will not matter. So, give us a good outro. That's not 2 miles per hour, please.
No, you do it. You
Okay.
got it.
If you like this video, please make sure you give us a thumbs up. This is R Dot with my host
Fowler.
Fowler. All right, yeah, Fowler. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you in the next podcast.